article after article after article about so-called mental health. The problem here is not mental health, the problem is psychiatric practice and the political use. Politicians are using psychiatry to kill, defame, steal, destroy human life, and that's what it is. And I have a challenge for all politicians in Australia and also all psychiatrists and people who work with them or support their work. I have a challenge, well, particularly for the politicians and the psychiatrists who've brought in a genocidal bill in Western Australia. They've passed it. Psychiatric bill targets children, targets Aboriginal people, has provision for use of the police, which proves it's Nazism, and it's nothing to do with people's health or mental health. It's about control of people. They steal people's money through the public trust. They're defrauding the Commonwealth through the public trust. They kill people with their treatments. They destroy their lives, human rights abuses, forcibly locking them up. And they torture people, which is what psychiatry is, torture, and they steal their assets and their money through the public trust. Absolutely horrific. Should be shut down and all that money given back to their victims, the ones that are living. Anyway, my challenge is, you think that your practices are so safe and so good for the public, which is a big fat lie, but if you think that is the case, you prove it to the public. You lock yourselves up, all the politicians and all the psychiatrists, go and lock yourselves up for 1 year and subject yourselves, forcibly lock yourselves up, which is the legislation you have created. Forcibly lock yourself up and forcibly give yourselves ECT, psychosurgery and injections of chemical compounds and all the other shitty drugs that you give. Give it to yourselves and your family members and your friends for 1 year, and I guarantee half of you will be dead after that year. You prove to the public that these treatments are safe by subjecting yourselves, all politicians in Australia, all psychiatrists, you subject yourselves to your own violent, dangerous treatments in those facilities to prove to the public that they are safe. And I guarantee you will never do it, you cannot do it, because your treatments are, your practices are violent and they're dangerous. So, that's my challenge to all Australian politicians and psychiatrists and any of these other people, so-called medical experts. Well, it's a political sociological practice, obviously. It's got nothing to do with medicine, what they're doing. In fact, they destroy people's mental health. If we abolish psychiatry in Australia, the mental health of the public will improve. And there are a huge range of therapeutic practices that promote the health of people and their mental health. One of my areas of teaching expertise is physical education and health education. As long as the public is exercising, eating healthy, they've got somewhere to live, a job, supportive family and social networks and structures, and or economic support, they've got an income of some sort, they've got somewhere to live, they'll be fine. They will be fine. So you're the worst hypocrites in the world and the biggest liars. Go and subject yourself to your own treatments for 1 year, and half of you will be dead at the end of it, I guarantee it. But you won't do it because you're monsters. You want to control and drug and lock up by force and use violence against other people and other people's family members and relatives and friends in society. It's societal control. A very dangerous and violent political sociological practice which is about control of people. Results in death. And you want to do that to other people. You create this legislation. You think it's so fantastic. You think it's so safe. You think it's effective. You think it's working. It's not working. You prove to the public that it works by subjecting yourself to your own genocidal laws and practices for a year, like I said, and your family members and friends and all the people who support you, do it to yourselves. And you'll be abolishing it in a flash, because you'll die. You'll come out so tortured and deranged that you won't be able to function properly. And you deserve it. You deserve to have those treatments. All politicians and psychiatrists deserve to have their own treatments, subjected themselves to their own treatments. You deserve it. Go for it. Fantastic. I'll prove to you that it's not safe. Do it to yourselves. So that's my challenge to you. These are genocidal monsters, and you're going to burn in hell. And that's it, that's the judgment. And anybody with a bit of intelligence and a bit of morality and does a little bit of research on the practice and objective analysis of the legislation that you created and the practices associated with it, and all the evidence of the death and the testimonies given by the millions of victims throughout the world and their family members, and the testimonies of professional people throughout the whole world, and all the research. Anybody who does that for a couple of months, you'll work it out that it needs to be abolished. It must be abolished. And the people who have killed thousands of people over the years and destroyed their lives, and stole their assets and money, engaged in the worst human rights abuses, torture, inhumane, degrading treatments and torture, where there's legislation for that in Commonwealth law, in Australia, human rights legislation under Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Act of 1986, the Human Rights Parliamentary Scrutiny Act of 2011, they cannot do those practices. In Western Australia, they should not have passed that legislation because it breaches Commonwealth human rights laws, excuse me, it breaches Commonwealth human rights laws applicable to Australian domestic law. The problem is the judges and the magistrates in the courts are not upholding human rights legislation for Australian-born citizens. So therefore the politicians and their agencies, a whole range of agencies, can kill off poor and vulnerable people. The judges and the magistrates will be just as guilty if they do not uphold human rights legislation for Australian-born citizens. International legislation, the only good legislation coming out now of the United Nations is human rights legislation, and political-made laws legislation, human rights legislation, but it must be applied to Australian-born citizens, and the judges and the magistrates must apply it, and we must have human rights courts in Australia to stop it, and for trials and for justice. Otherwise they'll just keep doing it. And the public must fight. The public must empower themselves and fight, and the power must be given back to the people. It must be returned to the people to pursue that for justice. Thank you very much.